dumplings. And while technically that's what they are, I prefer to think of these as the world's easiest free-form pasta, since the taste and texture are very similar, and they will pretty much work with any of your favorite pasta preparations. Plus, above and beyond all that, this stuff is way faster and easier to make than pasta, as you're about to see. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with our Spätzle batter, which is made with some all-purpose flour, to which we will add 1 large egg. Of course, we'll also need some salt, which we always do, as well as, for me, a little pinch of cayenne, which I'm assuming is rarely added in Germany. But hey, their loss. And then we'll go ahead and finish this up with a spoon of creme fraiche, or sour cream, or yogurt. And then last but not least, a nice splash of whole milk. And believe it or not, that's it. And once all that's together, we will take a whisk and mix this smooth, and then evaluate for consistency. Okay, because what we're looking for is a batter that sort of drips slowly off the whisk, and not really run off the whisk. Okay, we don't want this too liquidy. So we will give it a mix and check it out. And you see how that's kind of pouring off quickly? Okay, so I think this is a little too thin, and to adjust that, we will simply add a little bit of flour. And conversely, if it's too thick, you'll add a little bit of milk. But anyway, we're going to stir in some more flour and check it out again. And now, as you can hopefully see, it's still dripping off the whisk, but much slower. Okay, so for me, that's looking very good. And then once we've adjusted the texture until we think it's just right, let's go ahead and clean off that whisk with a spatula. And I'll go ahead and give you one more look at the viscosity we're shooting for. Okay, so forget the exact measurements. You're going to have to adjust until you have something that looks like this. And then once the batter's set, we're going to need some kind of Spaetzle making tool with which to push our batter through into our boiling water. And while you could buy something specifically designed for this, you don't need to, because you probably already have one of these. Your standard cheese grater works perfectly for this operation. As long as the holes are at least this big, it's going to work great. And by the way, we're not going to use the side that grates the cheese. We're going to use the other side, also known as the smooth side. And how this works is we simply take some of our batter and transfer that onto our grater, and then we'll use our spatula to push it through, which again is why we want to make sure we're using the smooth side. Okay, nobody wants grated rubber in their Spaetzle. And that is it. A pretty simple technique. Except, of course, we're not going to do it back into the bowl. We're going to do that into some boiling salted water. But before we do that, let's do this. We want to first prep whatever sauce or substance our finished Spaetzle are going to go into. And my personal favorite, and very classic choice, would be some toasted butter. So what we'll do is melt some butter over medium heat, and simply cook it, swirling occasionally, until that toasts to a nice golden brown. And yes, if you want to go darker, feel free. Or if you don't want it toasted, and just want to melt the butter, that also works great. Okay, so how you finish this is going to be up to you. You are, after all, the Hansel and Gretel of your Spaetzle. But anyway, you can see how far I toasted mine. And once that's set, assuming we've brought some salted water to a boil, we are ready to extrude our batter. So what we'll do is place our batter on top of our grater, a couple spoonfuls at a time. Oh, and by the way, one way you can tell your texture was perfect: the batter won't drip through until you push it with the spatula. Okay, there's a very old German saying that I just made up. If it drips before you push, add some flour so you don't have mush. So not to brag, but this was looking just about perfect. And as you may notice, that's all sort of clumping together in one spot. And there's 2 reasons for that. One is I'm just looking at the viewfinder and not paying attention, because I should be moving that grater around more as I'm dropping it in. But also, I could have this boiling more furiously, but I didn't because it was fogging the lens. Having said that, it's not a problem, because when we take the strainer and give it a stir, those will all separate beautifully. Which reminds me, these are considered done when they float to the top, which, as you saw, happens very quickly. So this really is a super fast recipe. And then once those are floating, what we'll do is take a strainer and simply transfer those into our melted butter, or whatever sauce you happen to be using, and we'll repeat that very easy process until our batter's gone. And by the way, this was a very small batch I did, just using 1 egg. It's only enough for like 2 portions. But the good news is you can scale this up as much as you want. And if you are going to make larger quantities, you can totally do this step ahead, and then just reheat these in the sauce when you're ready to serve. So something to keep in mind. But anyway, we'll continue on until our batter's been used up, and all our Spaetzle has been transferred to our pan, at which point we have a few options. Since everything's hot, we could just toss this and serve it. But personally, I like to put the heat back on medium and give these a little bit of a saute for a minute or 2. Okay, I don't really brown them, although some people do, and that is a very nice way to go. But I'm just going to cook these in that hot butter for about a minute or so, just to give them a little bit of time to absorb that beautiful nutty flavor. And of course, as always, we definitely want to give it a taste to see if it needs a little pinch of salt, which mine did. So I tossed some in and gave it one last stir, as well as one last taste. And once we're happy with it, we can turn off the heat, and then possibly finish with a little bit of fresh herb. I had some Italian parsley, so I'm using that. But some freshly snipped chives are also a wonderful choice. So I stirred that in, and that's it. Our Spätzle is ready to serve up. And yes, I'm pretty sure I've pronounced that differently every single time I've said it. I should have just stuck with Spätzle, which, by the way, translates to little sparrows. So you could always go with that instead. But anyway, we'll spoon that up, and it's wonderful served as is. Or maybe with a little grating of cheese. Or even better yet, maybe make a little space in the middle and garnish this with a piece of cider braised pork shoulder. Oh yeah, that would be a great pairing. And I finished that up with a little extra creme fraiche and pinch of parsley. And normally at this point I would say stay tuned for the pork video. But you know what? I think we already did it. But I'll check. And if we don't, we'll do one. But anyway, let's forget about that luscious pork for a second. Let me go in for a taste so I can see how I did on my Spaetzle. And you know what? I did pretty darn good. They have a beautiful pasta-like flavor, which is amplified by our toasted butter. And the texture was just right. Okay, firm but not chewy. Tender but not soft. These really were spot on and uber delicious. And as you can imagine, just absolutely amazing with any kind of braised meat. And as you well know, we're heading right into braised meat season. So I was very happy with how this came out. I mean, I would make these even if they were hard and complicated. But they're not. As you saw, they're super easy and fast to make. So for all those reasons and more, I really do hope you give these a try soon. So head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.